Hi everyone, welcome to Accounting 1B. I'm recording myself, so you get to listen to me as I record myself. So as we do this, and now it saves a little bit of time. But I'm in Appleus, I'm scrolling down to 6.4 working together. We've done this before, right? So, oops, I went to 6.3, I'm going to 6.4 working together. Sorry, thank you. Okay, so here's a worksheet already, and we just need to fill it in. And I'm on page 170 of the textbook, and the instructions are also in the link above. But it says, this is Paul Cody has completed the September monthly worksheet for his business Leafy Lift, and the worksheet is general ledger accounts are given in the working papers. Mr. Cody believes he's made some errors. In preparing the worksheet, he's asked you to help him verify the worksheet. So we're going to go through. So examine the worksheet and the general ledger accounts and make a list of the errors you find and correct the errors you find in the general ledger accounts and prepare a corrected worksheet. Okay, so there's this one up here above, and you've looked at them. And I'm not going to look at these up above because I can see there's some mathematical errors here, and they didn't add correctly and they didn't subtract correctly. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to look at the one below. So I'm going to go down to select the general ledger, and we're just going to go through one at a time. So we're going to do cash. Obviously a 4,000 plus a 7,000 is not 15,000, so we need to make a corrected entry on this, do the math correctly. So we just take and add those together, and you should have got 11,000, right? Okay, and 11,000 minus 6,750 is not $8,000. It should be 4,250. So is the correct dollar amount for cash. So up here in the cash account, I put the 4,250 in my debit column. Oh, I should put the count. This is leaf lift. Sheesh. And what month is it for? Is it September? For the month end of September. So there's my titles. So now I'm going to go to the next account. I'm going to check each account one at a time, make sure there's not any mathematical errors. So I'm going to go to accounts receivable Sharon Mann. Wow. And that says it's $1,000. Looks like there's not any errors because there's only one entry. So I'm going to put $1,000 debit in my worksheet. And now I'm going to go to supplies. And there's an obvious error because 600 plus 425 is not 725. It should be 1,025, right? So then I'm going to put 1,025 up here on my worksheet. Because there's a mathematical error there. So now I'm going to go to the next account, prepaid insurance. And 150 plus 150 is not 400, but it should be 300. So I'm going to put 300 in my debit column on prepaid insurance on my worksheet. And I made the corrected entry in my ledger. So now I'm going to go to accounts payable, which is a liability account. And it looks like that one's done correctly. 300 minus 150 is 150. And so I'm going to put 150 on the worksheet's credit column for accounts payable power supply. So let me open the next account, which is the capital. Paul Cody's capital. Looks like there's not really any math, so it's still $5,000 as a credit to Paul Cody's capital in the credit column. The drawing account is next, Paul Cody's drawing. And looks like it's a debit of $300, so I'm going to put a debit on the worksheet for $300 for the drawing account. Income summary should be nothing in it, but we'll open it up just to verify it, and it's empty, which is good. So now I'm going to go to the sales, which is the next account. I don't know how they did that, transposed to numbers or something, but it should be 1,900 as a credit. And so on the worksheet, I'm going to go to the credit column, put 1,900 for sales. And I made the corrected entry in my ledger. So let me close sales and then open insurance expense. Should be empty, nothing in it. And it is, so that's a good sign. So we go to the next one, miscellaneous expense. And 150 plus 25, looks like they subtracted instead of added, should be 175 debit. So I'm going to put 175 in the debit column for miscellaneous expense. And then I'm going to go to supplies expense, and it should be empty also, but we're just going to verify it to make sure it is. And there's nothing there, so that's a good sign. Okay, so now I'm back to my worksheet. I have my titles, and then I have my dollar amounts I pulled from my ledgers, my general ledger accounts for each one. I'm going to add up my debit column. So we bring my handy dandy calculator. So I'm going to add these, mind you of what? Blue clues, is that what they say? Oh, I didn't know that. Maybe I've been watching things with my granddaughter too much. So, but I'm going to take and add the debit column, so 4,250 plus the 1,000 plus the 1,025 plus the 300 plus the 300 plus 175, and I get 7,050. And let me add up the next column. So it is 150 plus 5,000 plus 1,900. I get 7,050. That's a good sign because they're the same number and they balance. And so now I'm to the adjustment column. Okay. And we need to look at the previous worksheet, so let me open this up. Looks like I had an adjustment of 390, but they got them in the wrong columns. So I'm going to take the 390 and put it as a credit for supplies, and then supplies expense is going to be 390. And then if I look at my worksheet, 95 for prepaid insurance, it was put in the wrong column, so I need to move it to the credit column as a credit to prepaid insurance and a debit to insurance expense and the debit adjust. So there's my two adjustments. I assume they're correct because there's no other indication that they're anything else. So we're just going to take what they had and put them in the correct columns this time, and then I'm going to add them up. So 390 plus 95, I get 485, right? For both of them. So now I'm to my income statement and my balance sheet columns. And so remember, everything from income summary I'm going to transfer to the balance sheet columns. Everything below income summary I'm going to transfer to the income statement columns. So cash I'm going to put over here is 4,250. The accounts receivable for Sharon is going to be 1,000 in the debit column of the balance sheet. The next one I'm going to take the 1,025 625 minus the 390 because it's a credit. And I'm going to put the 635 in the credit column, or the debit column of the balance sheet. And then I'm going to take the 300 minus the 95, and I'm going to put the 205 in the debit column of the balance sheet. Then I'm going to transfer accounts payable power supply to the credit column of the balance sheet. And then Paul's capital, I'm going to take the 5,000, transfer it to the credit column of the balance sheet. And then Paul's drawing, I'm going to take the 300 debit and transfer it to the debit column of the balance sheet. And then I reached income summary, so I have to go to cells, and so cells I'm going to move over to the income statement columns, debit and credit column. I'm going to put the credit of 1,900 in the credit column for income statement. The 95 is a debit on the adjustment, so I'm going to put 95 as a debit on the income statement column. Then the 175 for miscellaneous expense is a debit on the income statement column. And then the 390 is a debit. It was a debit in the adjustment column, and there's nothing in the trial balance column, so I'm going to 0 plus 390 is 390 debit in the income statement column. I'm going to add up these columns now. So I'm going to take 95 plus 175 plus 390. And that gives me 660, right? In the debit column of the income statement. I can do this one in my head. 1,900. Am I going too fast?
No.
Okay. There's a credit column added up. 1,900. It's also back here on the back TV too, Shayla, if that makes it easier. And then I'm going to add the debit column of my balance sheet, so this column I'm going to add up. So I'm going to take 4,250 plus the 1,000 plus the 635 plus the 205 plus the 300, and I get 6,390, that column added up. And then I'm going to add up the credit column for the balance sheet, the 150 plus the 5,000. And I get 5,150. And notice none of the numbers match up here across the bottom. So I'm going to go to my income statement column and do that one first. So if I took the 1,900 minus the smaller number of 660, I get a difference of 1,240. I'm going to put that in the debit column of income statement, 1,240. And now these two columns now add up, right? The debit column of income statement equals 1,900, and the credit column equals 1,900. So we're back in balance. So if I do the same thing to my balance sheet debit and credit column, I take the larger number, the 6,390, minus the 5,150. That gives me a dollar amount of 1,240. I put that in the credit column of my balance sheet, and now that equals 5,150 plus 1,240 equals 6,390, and now I'm back in balance on my balance sheet. Okay, so if you noticed, the difference between the two numbers on the balance sheet was 1,240, and the difference between the two numbers on the income statement was 1,240, which are the same numbers, which means I did it correctly because I came up with the same numbers. And that is my net income. So I made a profit on this month. In September, I made a profit of $1,240. And I know I've done it correctly because I came up with the same numbers. And that's correcting issues. Obviously, Paul didn't know how to do a worksheet. He kind of guessed and kind of butchered it. But now it's correct, and so we can give him the correct information so he can do his financial reports later on correctly. But anyway, that's 6-4 working together. will give you time to work on your own 6.4, and then you should be able to do the application problem 6.4 also. And so I'll be quiet, stop my demo, let you guys work from there. And good luck.